Hello and welcome to the Charles River Parkland show. My name is Renata von Tscharner. I'm the founder and president of the Charles River Conservancy. And today we're going to look at the river through the eyes of an artist. Welcome, Carole Bolsey.
Thank you, Renata.
It's a great privilege to have Carole Bolsey here today. She has painted the Charles in many different locations from many different angles, and I am lucky to have some of her paintings in my office, and it's as if a window is open from my office and I see the water, I see the bridges, I see people enjoying the parklands. It's just an amazing way, different way to see the river. So today we're going to meet Carole and some of her paintings and how she got to paint the Charles River. And when I first met Carole, I knew her painting barns and boats. So there was a path to the Charles. So welcome, Carole. And let me just give you a little bit of introduction to the context of the Charles River Conservancy. As you know, we are revitalizing the parklands to make the parklands more active, attractive, and accessible for all. We work with advocacy, we have volunteers, we restore, and we have recreation programs. But artists have always played an important role in the Conservancy because I feel artists help us see the world differently. We've had people write stories about the Charles River. We had people compose songs and poems, and we had photographers. And now we have, you paint in oil and acrylic?
I use all different media.
All different media. So we will be looking at the river on different spots. You know that river well, with 400 acres of parklands from the harbor up to the Watertown Dam, and 300,000 people live near this can walk to the river. 400,000 work within a 10-minute walk, and over 1 million people every year use those parklands. And I think you're one of the people who love the river, who loves the river and has used it. Tell us how you first came to Boston and got to know the river.
I came to Boston because I had seen Beacon Hill once, and I thought it seemed like a city that had as much beauty as a European city, and so that's all I knew about it, and I came here then. And Boston also shares with the great European cities the possessing of a great river right down the middle of the city. And who was it who said that a city has to have a river to be a truly great city? I think it's true. So I lived in Boston from 1 year out of college, and then for 19 years. And I showed my work here, and I taught, and lived in the city until one day I had an epiphany. I have to get out of the city. I have to live in the country, and I bought a house on the South Shore here in Massachusetts. But, you know, it's impossible to live in Cambridge or Boston and not have a powerful relationship to this river. To me, this river is like a bloodstream, the bloodstream that flows right through the heart, literally, to follow the metaphor, right through the heart of these two great cities, which I think of as one great city. Everything, sooner or later, brings you to the river. And in fact, when I first came to Boston, I was completely overwhelmed by the crazy streets. The river was the only way I ever knew how to find anything.
And many people think the river is straight. So if you follow the river, you assume you're in a straight line, but then you face south, you face north, and it doesn't actually help you much. But if you stay on the river, you eventually get to the harbor.
Well, and also, even though it's not in a straight line, in fact, if the river were straight, it wouldn't correspond to the rest of Boston or Cambridge, because nothing is straight. It's that the river, once you're at the river, you can tell north from south, sort of. You can tell east from west. You can see the city before you. The river is an amazing vantage point on both cities. It's the only place where you can see both cities together in their sort of sisterhood across the bridge.
And it was, I think, Gauguin, since you are a painter, Gauguin, who said that water doubles everything. So when you're on the river, suddenly one tree becomes a tree up and a tree down. The bridge goes up and down. So everything is so much richer.
Well, that is actually, you've put your finger right on the heart of one of the most important things in my work, which is that water doubles everything.
All right. Well, we get to the water. Let's get to to your barns from the countryside first, because since I was an architect in my earlier life, I was very attracted to your barns. Give us a sense of what your barn paintings were all about.
Well, when I moved from the city to the country, I found an old farmhouse, and attached to it is and was a barn from the 1600s. And this shape suddenly, I call it the shape with no name. There's no generic name that I've ever encountered in now 17 languages where I've looked for it, a generic name for a building with 4 sides and a peaked roof. And yet, research has shown me that it has been around since at least 5,500 BC in Mesopotamia, and it's still the most normal shape that you see. When somebody starts a house, usually this is the shape that's sort of at the bottom of it. And it may be in many permutations. There can be clusters of them together.
Now, and do I see water here? Or
and here is water.
It's
exactly.
the water. And then
yes.
you moved into, the house was one archetype you worked with, but then you also moved, I also recall many water paintings that you have done.
Right. The house shape, the shape with no name, was important to me because that house was the first place I ever felt was home, truly home. I sank a taproot there, and I began painting this barn shape. And where we live on the South Shore is also on the water, and the tides and the excitement of weather and the sea here is such a powerful part of living here that I very soon began painting boats. But they're very simple boats. They are a dinghy or a rowboat.
Is this boat underwater?
This boat is underwater. This is a brand new painting. Now, it's interesting, painting a boat underwater has had I've encountered 2 radically different reactions from people looking at it. The first one I did, I showed it in Washington, D.C. at a gallery, and the first person who saw it said, "Oh, that's such an upsetting image." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "I'm a sailor, and a sunken boat is a terrible thing." I thought, oh, that's not at all why I painted it underwater as a bad thing. Yeah. Really, when I came back to live here in Massachusetts after living in the Mid-Atlantic for 14 years, I asked a friend who's a sailor, what does a sunken dinghy or dory or rowboat say to you? Is it an upsetting image? She said, no, not really, because every winter we sink all our small boats to protect them from the winter and from the storms.
Wow.
And that way the wood stays nicely swollen, it doesn't shrink, so the boats don't leak. So it's an image with multiple interpretations.
Yeah. I think the image you showed of the boat, the water of the Charles wouldn't be quite as clear, but we will not get into that. But you have here an image which also is a very new one, kind of a departure from your more placid surface. Here things are really moving. It's as if the fireworks on the esplanade were on.
Yeah, there are fireworks going on in me. This is a point in my life when I'm feeling that everything is possible and that it's now or never, and that I have to paint all the energy that I feel is potentially there in each painting. This painting, as you see, it's different from the boat paintings that I had done in the past because they showed boats sitting on water, which presumably is horizontal, and there was more of nature was in its proper order. The water was sitting in its bed.
Goes from left to right.
It was horizontal, and Now there's an energy that I feel, and this painting in particular, this piece is called Surge Left. The water is lifting up and surging off the left edge of the canvas and shoving the boats out of the picture on the left and at the top.
Yeah.
And so this painting is not about boats, it's not about water, it's about the energy of movement within. The force of the water is underneath.
Yeah, and now that it brings us also, of course, to the river. Here's a bit of a quieter painting, but this brings us closer to the river, which is this force of between Cambridge and Boston. Now, we're looking at these paintings, and they're very large paintings. I mean, what is the average size of your painting? They're gigantic.
Usually they're pretty big. The Blue Boats painting we were just looking at is well, it's not very big. It's 5 feet wide. The one before that, which is called Surge Left 2, is 7 feet wide.
Yeah.
And sometimes the paintings are 9, 10 feet.
Yeah.
I also make freestanding screens, which are 10 to 15 feet and 7 feet high. So I usually work big because my paintings are about light and space. And when a painting is the size of a wall and it's completely covered with light and space, it makes the wall go away and opens the room.
Yeah, it sure does. Now, this painting, here we are on the Charles. It's the near the Elliott Bridge. It's the Cambridge Boat Club, just a little bit at the top left. Tell us how you go about depicting the Charles here.
Well, you know, your vision for the Charles is so encompassing, so all-inclusive. You have inspired me to think about these paintings as the Charles, which is everyone's river. The Charles belongs to all 300,000 of us and more. And every 100 yards, the Charles has a different face, as we all know. And it's so interesting to me that people can recognize a little piece of the river that's a few hundred yards long. They know exactly where it is because its character is so distinctive. It changes so dramatically. And it changes so dramatically by season.
Yeah.
This is a winter image. This is what you would see if you look towards Hell's Half Acre from Soldiers Field Road.
And from Herder Park, yes.
From Herder Park, right. And I did not paint any of these paintings standing on site. I have such a long-standing relationship with this river that, like everyone else who lives here, you show me a little piece of it, and I know which little piece of it it is.
Yeah.
And so I made these paintings like poetic, atmospheric moments.
Yeah, the birches in
river.
there, the darkness, and the sparkle of the water. It's very powerful.
And here the river is doubling the shore. And, you know, this is one of the things about the Charles, which has always been wonderful, but which has really been enhanced in recent years by your actions and by the huge civic attention that's been paid to the shorelands, which before were just pounded mud, and there was a lot of trash and erosion, and they were not pretty. The water was always beautiful, but you really had to overlook the parklands on both sides. They were a mess. And now it's so beautiful to see the river ensconced between now they're really parkland. They're not just dirt paths.
Yeah. Now you're going to look at a painting of a bridge, probably the bridge I love the most over this river. And I feel the bridges have almost a similar archetypal force as the barns and the boats, and particularly this bridge, which is a bit more than an archetype. It's really a piece of art, the Longfellow Bridge, and I love that bridge, and it's going to undergoing a major restoration, and you depicted it with this railing in front, which I think is very powerful.
Well, as we also know from living near this river, there are places where you see the river from a car through railings, and this particular end of Memorial Drive dips down below the level of the bridge, and so you glimpse the river through the railing as the railing whizzes by, you glimpse the river through it. And I call all of these paintings glimpses of the Charles, because there's no one image for me that sums up the Charles. If anything, what's so wonderful about it is how multiple and multifarious and varied all of its personalities are. And the Longfellow Bridge is so much architecture, and I also love architecture. I do architectural design as well. And the geometry of the bridges, all of the bridges over the Charles have a wonderful geometry to them, and I happen to be an artist who loves geometry. My boats are very much about geometry. The barn shapes are geometric shapes. You know, they're heptahedrons. So I paint things very, very simply. I
here we have
details.
The River Street Bridge. You call it Day Bridge because you have the same bridge by night, although we won't show that because it's so dark. But there, I think that could probably be very early in the morning when the light comes from the east.
Yes.
That's how the rowers experience, I call it the underbelly of the bridge, and the River Street Bridge is has a very powerful architecture. It's a bit crumbling, but it's very powerful.
Well, another thing about the Charles that I really love is what this painting is about, which is that the light here in New England is very alive, very vibrant, and it is doubled by the river. And then when it's reflected back into the river by the bellies of the bridges, it becomes almost blinding. It's an amazing phenomenon, and that is what several of the paintings that I've made are really about. That is the experience of light. The river is a focus instrument for light, and the bridges are focus instruments for light and movement. And at times it's abstracted like this. This is almost an abstract painting, and the light is so exhilarating that I find it very exciting. So some of these paintings that I've done of the river are like this. They're atmospheric. They're about a moment in the life of the river, a moment in one's day.
I think we're going to go even into something more